and welcome back to Galactic Reviews. This week we're going over the animated Injustice movie. So, the basic plot of Injustice, if you haven't played the video games or read the comic books, is that something happens to Superman personally. And in that, he spirals out of control, becoming a little bit like Batman in an extent, I suppose you could say, with personality, and just jumps off a much farther cliff than Batman ever has. So you get to see this whole friends versus friends in a way.
So I'll give it a 3, might give it lower because granted some of the stuff they stayed true with to some of the core stuff. It was different things, and I understand it's like tons of comic books, like almost a 2-hour game that it's based off of,
Animation.
like with the cutscenes
hmm
and stuff. So about 2 hours of that. This is mostly based off the comic books though, which is why I didn't quite mind the animation for it.
The
But
animation to me reminded me more of like old school Justice League.
Old school animation when it was worse? Ah,
yeah, but
Yes, like the old
I didn't. Yeah,
Justice League animated TV show. That's
yeah,
what it
like
reminded me of.
yeah, very much 2D. And I
hmm
understand the complaint because I mean this is based off of somewhat the game, and you were expecting maybe like more like CGI, 3D-esque kind of, at least more 3D looking than almost like comic book page 2D
no, I just
animation.
I just expected it to be cleaner. It seemed very choppy and like they took some shortcuts and they didn't include as many frames as they could have to make the animation
For some of
smooth.
the characters, yeah, I know
And it was
Wonder
just
Woman was
very like
really
rough
bad.
around the edges for a Warner Brothers production based on their, because I went and watched some of the first Killing, not the Killing Joke, Long Halloween, I think. I went and watched, I think, a good portion of the first movie. And the animation's just smoother in the fight scenes, and it's not so like, and of course, jaggedy animation is a style that I've seen, but this seemed like it wasn't trying to do it on purpose, and it was just kind of sloppy. And that's the main thing that I have for criticizing the movie because I don't know much about the story
Yeah,
with
the
details.
story was okay, like in and of itself if you don't take all the stuff it came from, but if you compare it to the stuff it came from, it is a far cry from what you get from the comic book run of Injustice, both through all years 1 through 5, as well as doesn't even tie into the video games. So it kind of makes you wonder why they made it at all, because that's what it's harkening back to, is that video game.
Did the video game come first, or did like the storyline come first?
The video game came first, and then I believe they started doing comic book runs, if I remember that correctly, Zach,
Yeah, the
where they
video
did
game
like
came
how,
first.
where, yeah, where they like showed how the story got to that point where you see it in the video game. And it's interesting progression. Let's see, there were a whole bunch of characters that they cut out from the comic book run that they could have used. They included a few.
I feel like they rushed a few of their deaths.
Yeah, Green Arrows especially.
Faded
Uh,
Flash 30. Oh my
they
goodness.
did, they
100%
did.
he could have
A
avoided that.
Oh no, no, no,
buzzsaw?
no. The problem with that is he is such an important character in the game that I was so disappointed about that.
First
That's
off,
what
he could
pissed me
see
off
this he
most.
could see the gas coming and then he could do so many different things
One
to
of
avoid
Yeah,
that.
one of the arguably more well-liked characters of the Justice League. Like top
You
five
immediately killed.
most favorite Justice League
oh
characters
yeah,
publicly. And
oh
just
yeah,
not
without a
even a
doubt.
minute of screen time. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and
That was a big problem for me.
another problem that I see is that this is in this universe, you already have Dick Grayson, relatively almost, like I would say at least almost mid 20s, early 30s, late somewhere around that age range. So there would also be Wally
Mhm.
West, who would then take up the Flash mantle, and you would think you would at least see him
Yeah,
try
because
to.
you also had Raven show up
Yeah,
as
and
well.
Cyborg. So I mean, it's just some of their choices were weird, but for right now, I'll leave it for right now because
I
we're
know,
kind of already
yeah,
touching on the spoiler territory.
I'll give it a 4 only because I don't know enough about it to be mad about some of the decisions. The stuff that I did see, I didn't enjoy.
yeah, I was gonna give it like a 4.5. I think what really made this movie funny was I laughed in the first like minute of it when he's like, spoilers if you didn't know this, but when he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're pregnant. We're pregnant. No, it's just mostly you. Well, I helped a little bit." And I'm like, "Dang." Yeah, I think that was the only point I really enjoyed the movie was that small clip of,
You mean before it started?
yeah, pretty
Wow.
much. I mean, I really enjoyed that one scene. There were some parts I was like, oh, that's cool. There were some heroes and villains that I enjoyed seeing. You get like the whole spectrum of Damian Wayne in this one movie.
He's one of the characters that I have a problem with in this franchise in general. Mainly because at this point in his life, he should be more towards the Batman side of looking at things instead of Ra's al Ghul.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, he's very much in Ra's al Ghul way of thinking. So it's
Well, I don't remember that from the games or the little bit of the comic book I remember.
oh no, he does it's the same way. That's one of the things they kept. It's very much the same way. That's how he turns. So I mean, it's very much the same way. I also don't like how Dick Grayson died. I think that was
That
dumb.
was cheap. That was cheap.
That was cheap and stupid.
I mean, I
And
like how we got more Dick Grayson content after that because I just
Yeah.
yeah,
love
well,
his
I mean,
character.
you get that in the comics where
Yeah,
he turns into Deathwing or whatever they stupidly
Yeah.
call him.
I just like his personality. I like seeing Dick Grayson
Dick
content.
Grayson's
He's
Yeah.
just fun.
Dick Grayson will always be my favorite version or rendition of Robin.
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
just enjoy his personality.
they were very picky and choosy about what they decided to make into the film. The Atom, I believe, does do something kind of like that to Superman, where he does have kryptonite in his brain or something. But I believe Superman is then injected with like nanite robots, and he has to fight them off or whatever. And so he
Yeah,
ends up going like super subatomic and ends up getting lost into some like quantum space void, kind of like in Ant-Man.
yeah.
So this was kind of done
Yeah,
like
I
before
was
then.
gonna say, I was pretty sure he had a lot more.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Spoiler warnings for this crappy movie. Moving on. You know what you're getting into. So at this point, who cares? I will say they did include Mr. Terrific, and I thought it was interesting. At first, when I saw the trailer, I was like, wow, they're including Mr. Terrific. That's pretty cool. But then he basically kind of took Flash's part, and then later on took Plastic Man's son's part in that prison scene. In the prison scene, it's actually in the comics, it's actually Plastic Man's son who gets in imprisoned. And Plastic Man, it's actually an interesting dialogue between Plastic Man and Superman when Plastic Man goes to get Superman to release his son, and he's like, I would think that you would understand, having your son basically ripped away from you. It's interesting. Another thing
Yeah.
I didn't like is like for some people they don't like how Wonder Woman turns so quickly into like wanting to kill people,
Yeah, that
which I
was
understand. I think that's more so that could be more so placed towards the beginning thought of Wonder Woman, like in how she would think, like how humans like
Hmm.
the best way to get rid of a problem is to eliminate it.
yeah. Like
I
there
would
was
see
no
that.
conflict with her in the beginning whatsoever. She was all for the plan.
Oh
And then
yeah,
all of a
and
sudden, when it looked a
it
little bit off to her, she went a whole 180.
yeah.
Just a
No,
180.
I think that was a thing where like at some point they were just like, I'm not saying this is the case, but at some point it looked like, oh, she's a woman, we got a full circle or something of that nature, because they killed off Hawkman and Cyborg, who looked like they were completely in with the plan no matter what in the little screen time that we had with them. Because I mean, Cyborg was running the prison, which in the comics was
Hawkman,
actually Metamorpho.
let's be honest, Hawkman had like no screen time. He
Oh
did
no,
he
and then he
did he
got
even
killed in
have
the most brutal
dialogue?
way.
I don't even think he had dialogue.
Well, no, he did. He screamed a little here and a little there, in
Oh
pain.
yes, yes, in pain, in
And
pain.
then so they pulled Amazo really fast. I don't think Amazo appeared until the Injustice 2 comic, which was in between between the 1 and 2 game. No Superboy, which would have been interesting because that's someone of his power set.
Well, another thing I had a problem with this movie. You saw some heroes,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden they disappeared.
Yeah, that's another thing, which I'll get to in a second, because
Okay,
they kill off Flash, which is the first problem because Flash is a very, very big.
he's
Um,
a crucial
he's
character
a
in the
crucial
plot.
part in the game
Well,
as
that
well
too.
as the main plot.
Yeah.
Him, Shazam, and Green Lantern, who all disappear within the
Okay, I
first time
understand.
that they're brought up.
I understand how Green Lantern they could write him out. Shazam, that one doesn't really make sense to me.
I mean, not really Green Lantern either, because he's technically the Green Lantern of that sector.
Well,
And for
true.
him to be
Well,
gone this long
fair
and not
point.
ever come back,
Well,
it's a problem.
his excuse was something to do with the Guardians.
True, but the Guardians would end up sending him back.
Say
And the problem
yes,
with that is they also have, in the comics at least, they also had Guy Gardner, John Stewart, and Kyle Rayner all on
which he
retainer.
which he brought up. He brought
Yeah,
all three of those up.
he at
Another
least brought up
problem I
Guy
had,
and John. So
yeah,
just to be clear,
another thing, you had like Raven and the Huntress.
appeared
They
for like
showed up
2 scenes and never
and then
appeared again.
they disappeared, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what happened with these
Well,
two?
in the comics, Huntress actually is killed by Wonder Woman, and Raven actually stays the whole time.
I was about to
Now,
say Raven's in there the whole time. She is a
yeah,
very key figure. This is one of the
yeah,
few things that she is a key figure.
yeah. And what's interesting in the comics is that Wonder Woman kind of like supports Superman in like how he's doing everything, and then Huntress ends up calling her out as she's dying or whatever. And Wonder Woman basically grabs the lasso of truth, and I believe she hangs her, or to some extent, or causes her whiplash, or something like that. It's a very all deaths in this in the comics and in they're very much cruel.
That was another thing with Ollie, Green
Oh,
Arrow.
that's the most egregious one because
I
they had a
was
whole thing with
I was so
him and Black
disappointed.
Canary. In the comics, you actually find out that Black Canary is also pregnant,
Mhm.
and when they killed Ollie like that, the death is actually way more
Because
interesting
they
because
didn't
John
there
Kent.
he had
Okay,
more reason to save Harley Quinn than just because Superman would hunt her down and kill her. There's a lot more reason he had behind it.
I also don't like how Harley Quinn changed so quickly, which I think is my main problem with the character in general because she does it almost everywhere.
I was about to
So
say they can get away with it because that's just her personality.
I know, but that's the part I don't like. So like I don't mind the rest of how she is. I just don't like that part where like she goes off on a whim. Like she goes very quickly from villain to superhero, and I didn't like it in the thing in the whatchamacallit in the comic book. Didn't like it really much here.
I mean, that's like
Um,
her character, though.
Yeah.
That's not out of character for her. She's very self-serving.
Yeah, I mean, they really didn't do that
She's
until
just
after
all for
around
fun.
this. When she was originally made, she was originally made to be like in a weird, uncontrollable like love with the Joker, which she was almost like a patsy to him every single time, which they did in the show. Now, her doing this thing, I don't think started till about after this game.
Well, the only way I can think they could do this is because Joker is dead. She has no real connection anymore. And since Green Arrow saved her and he's a hero, she's going to try her best to replace Joker with Green Arrow.
Yeah,
That could be how it went
but
in her
even if
head.
that, even
In
if
her
that's how it,
head, we don't
even if
know.
that's how that went, they didn't explain that at all.
Yeah,
They just very quickly went over it.
no. I will
That and
admit, yeah.
that doesn't explain all the comic books and TV shows that actually have her doing that, where none of that actually does happen. But I'll go ahead and give you that one,
Well,
but you don't see that play out. Yeah,
with this one, you can kind of guess what they
yeah.
intended.
I mean, I just don't like it, but
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I understand.
I'd rather her stay a villain and either grow as a villain or learn to give up that role and never touch the subject again and see someone who was manipulated and then leave and do something more like um,
Yeah.
Leslie
No,
Thompson
I will
kind of
say,
role.
before we continue, I would have
So
enjoyed this probably a lot more if they did it as a TV show or they broke it up into like 2 or 3 different movies.
they could either have broke it up into like 4 parts and have it like very quickly go over the 5 years of
Hmm.
comics that were in the trailers for this movie were supposedly taken reference from and tie it all into the video game. That way it all goes full circle. They're not retconning anything. It's all still there. If you want to go ahead and go into the comics and actually read it for yourself, you can, but this is more so a Cliff Notes version of what happened. They had a lot more they could have done with that everybody probably would have given them leeway for if they would have just admitted like we're not going to be able to do everything for it, which is
Yeah.
kind of why I'm giving them like a 2 or 3 because I honestly want to give them lower, but I understand all the expectations that are for this because this is a game that's been around since I believe 2015, 2013, something like that, if I'm
Hold
not
on. Let
mistaken.
me
2013.
It was
2013.
Mhm.
Okay, well then, yeah, okay, 2013. Then they really have no excuse.
April 2013.
All right, well, anyway, they had a whole bunch of characters that they just cut, didn't bring up at all. Dr. Fate was a big one, at least
Oh yeah,
was a
that's
big
right.
decent one in the first one. He also shows up in the second game. Dead Man never shows up. John Constantine never shows up. Granted, John Constantine doesn't really
You know
show up
what?
until
This
like
was
year 4.
you know what? They had a great opportunity to bring Static Shock, and they
Yeah,
failed me once again.
they could have they had a lot of characters they could have brought over. One another character they also could have brought in Jason Todd and Tim Drake when Dick Grayson was
Yeah,
killed to have them consoling Batman instead of just Selina Kyle,
yeah.
which I didn't quite. It was interesting, but it would have been better if Superman had actually gone after like Red Hood and Tim Drake to come and console.
It
That's the
would have
one thing
made a
that
lot
really
of
bothered me.
sense.
It really bothered me in the comics that that never happened or occurred.
I know.
Like it was only
I was
her,
expecting Red
nobody
Hood
else
to
that came
show up.
back.
I was expecting Red Hood to show up, or if anything, just the Flash just to magically
Well,
reappear
let's
and
see.
be like, "Oh, I lost
I'm
an
kind of
arm.
glad.
I'm
Yeah,
still
I'm kind of glad
alive."
they didn't bring in Tim Drake because they killed him horribly in the comics anyway.
Oh well.
First off, he is going to fight Superman with Superboy, Wonder Girl, and Starfire. Superman almost kills Superboy by poking his sternum into his heart and then tells them he can save him if he puts him in the Phantom Zone. Only the only thing is all of them got to go in the Phantom Zone. They all go in at some point after all the Injustice stuff happens, and it's in Injustice 2 in between it's the Injustice 2 comic book run. Batman finds out about it and gets them all out, and then Tim Drake is going to shake Robin's hand, and then General Zod, and then a laser beam comes out and kills Tim Drake, and you find out it's General Zod. It's the dumbest way for the character to go out.
It's so stupid.
And that's how Superboy actually ends up living again, and that's where Amazo comes in because Batman's going to kick General Zod's butt because he killed his last Robin because at that time he doesn't know Jason Todd's alive, and Damian Wayne is kind of dead to him
Yes.
at that moment. So and
Which
then
we can
Amazo
actually
shows
use
up,
that
and then
to.
Amazo shows up and kills General Zod, just takes his head and then leaves. His body's there. So Batman's like, okay, I'll use this heart and do a heart transplant into the Kryptonian kid, and that's how they save Superboy. So it's just they had a whole bunch of stuff they could have done. They had a whole bunch of characters that they could have used that they didn't. The characters that they decided to use to replace other characters, like Mr. Terrific to replace Flash during that chess scene. It's very interesting because they're playing chess at a very high level. Like they're going like light speed, super fast, doing like checkmate, checkmate, checkmate. It's very interesting, and they're doing the same, and it's the same exact dialogue that him and Mr. Terrific have, except that Superman doesn't ask him whether or not he's going to join or not because he's still in the tower. He's still part of the just very stupid and dumb. The certain stuff that they did, they kind of also ruined the Rogues. They just had Mirror Master in there instead of like all the Rogues when they were in there for their comic book run. They were working for roughly kind of for Batman, but also kind of for the government at that point, because ironically, they were the only villains that really had a code.
I mean, I was just gonna say, other than that, you can only checkmate once.
They
Yeah.
only did one checkmate.
No, they played multiple they played multiple chess games though in the thing, which is why they kept on saying checkmate, checkmate,
No, they
checkmate,
said
because it was
check,
No,
not
because you can
checkmate.
check multiple times, but
Yeah.
checkmate ends the game.
in the comic they do
Oh, multiple games. Okay.
they do
I was about to
multiple
say in the
games.
movie they only did one game and they said check like 5 times.
Yeah, well, in the movie they did multiple games, and instead of check, it was checkmate. I don't like how they Hawkman wasn't even supposed to be in there. It was supposed to be, I believe, it was Hawkwoman who was a
Which
main
honestly,
player,
she has a lot more
and
screen time
Hawkman
in.
doesn't show up until later with a kryptonite mace to go kill Superman because he basically stole his wife from him to some extent, and he's not wrong. Sinestro, like it's interesting because they took out Sinestro, which was one of the more important things of the comic book run, because
Yeah.
at some certain, ironically, Wonder Woman and Superman were kind of acting more so kind of like Red Hood was, where some villains deserve the death penalty, but not all of them did, and they weren't kind of ruling by a capitalist state until Sinestro, who kept pushing him, and so that's where that came in. Whereas this one, they just went ahead and made Superman go full force into the socialism rule and stuff. I said capitalism, I meant communism. That was my bad.
They only played one chess game.
In the movie? Yes.
I went and looked.
In the
I'm only
movie,
being a stickler on this because I like chess. That's it.
no, in the movie they
No,
only
I-
played one chess game.
Yeah,
in the,
yeah, yeah.
In the comic
in the
books.
comic, they played like multiple. Like
Gotcha.
every single time they talked was like a new chess game.
The only other thing we said we would bring it up, Damian Wayne's extreme personality change. It was very much like Wonder Woman's, where it completely did a 180 really, really quickly, and that's just not Damian Wayne's personality in the
Yeah,
first
he's
place.
very much headstrong. Now, I did like how it took like Dick Grayson coming back from a dead for him to figure this out instead of
Yeah.
like Wonder Woman just doing a 180 out of nowhere. At least Damian Wayne had a reason for doing a 180
More, yeah.
to some extent, with Dick Grayson being there and him kind of.
I mean,
And
to be
it,
perfectly honest, if you want to look at it, Dick Grayson is more of a father figure to Damian Wayne than Bruce Wayne.
it's especially true to the comics, especially since
Mhm.
let's see, I believe he first became Robin after Batman died, like Bruce Wayne Batman died, and Dick Grayson took up the mantle. And that's when Tim Drake moved on to become Red Robin. Damian Wayne came up as Robin, and Dick Grayson took up the mantle as Batman. So he
Yeah.
was technically his Robin, hence that relationship right there. This was such
And
a
you would
layup.
think like Cyborg would have more of an effect, especially when he saw Dick Grayson help
Oh yeah, like
the
that's another thing.
others.
One thing I did like was that I don't know if they did this in the comics, but Superman actually goes and picks up Jimmy's watch and actually kind of grieves a little bit for Jimmy, which I
Mhm.
don't think they did in the comics at all. So that is one thing that I did like better about this in
Yeah.
this that wasn't in the comics,
Dude, Jimmy
because
just
that
got
was one thing
taken
that
out. Like,
yeah,
He got assassinated.
did we get
Olsen got
Alf?
Olsen
Did
got
he have
taken
any
out really
lines?
quick. Huh?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he said
Okay.
because
I've got the shot. Give
I
me
think
one more shot.
Lois
And he
I
got
think
his shot.
yeah, yeah, which is
He got
ironic.
his last
So
shot. That was
that was
thinking about
ironic
it,
wordplay.
I mean, it's the
I also
Joker.
didn't.
They had to
Yeah, well,
work it in.
I also didn't like how the Joker sounded, and that's just me. I don't think the Joker sounded like the Joker. It sounded like someone do a bad imitation of the Joker.
Where's Mark Hamill? Bring him back.
Yeah,
He's not
I
dead yet. He can still go up.
they also brought up the multiverse for like 2 seconds, only to have it be a plot point later on, which I thought was just crappy storytelling.
Well, at first I thought they were bringing in the Phantom Zone.
Well, yeah, because that isn't that something that they do. No, that's something they do at the end of Injustice too.
Yeah, but I mean, when he came out carrying that machine and everything, I'm like, maybe they're
Yeah,
gonna try a Phantom Zone type thing.
after which I also thought was pretty dumb when they did the whole Superman versus Superman fight. Now in the actually no, in the video game, the reason why the classic Superman wins and the regime Superman loses is because the regime Superman at that point had had like 5 years where he wasn't really fighting any crime really, whereas the classic Superman had been fighting the whole time.
He was pretty much at
So
his
that's why
pinnacle.
he was better
Hmm.
and the regime Superman wasn't. Whereas in this one, they fudged up that fight. They made it a stupid reason why he changed back. So I mean, it was bad all the way around. I mean, I guess it is what it is, but it was just they could have had so much better, and they did so much worse.
And I don't see them being able to pull off doing Injustice 2 or anything like
I mean,
that
they technically
because,
can't because they made Superman basically.
well,
Well,
it's not
first of
just
all,
that. They've killed off all the main characters from like Injustice 2.
true, Cyborg's no longer a main character anymore.
Neither is
Uh,
Ollie. Black Canary's not gonna show up
well,
then.
no, well, the problem with that is Ollie in that one is from a different universe where his Black Canary died, and that's where Doctor Fate came and sent Black Canary and her unborn child slash I think at that point he was actually born, so sent his son to a universe where Ollie had lived and Black Canary had died, where they kind of lived at peace or whatever.
Hmm.
Now, why as to why they came back, no idea, because that was a freebie to just go away. But yeah, also found it weird that no other heroes stood up to Superman's regime other than the few that were in Batman's cave. So that makes me think that,
I was expecting another Aquaman scene
yeah,
as well.
well, that made me think either they all like decided to quit or they all sided with Superman at that point because there's no explanation given as to why none of them really left. So I mean, it's weird, but
Didn't like it because I thought the animation. I mean, it's not awful, but it's not as good as they've done before.
As recent
Like,
stuff.
not even close. Not even close to like TV shows, 20-minute small budget TV shows on Cartoon Network. It's just not cleaned up, I
As I
guess.
said, it reminded me of the old animation they had like 10, 15 years ago.
There you go. So it just kind of seemed like they just, for money, they put minimal work into it, kill off characters that would have been hard to animate big scenes with later, didn't give it their all. Other than that, I don't generally enjoy the Injustice plot because it's childish, or at least the reactions of certain heroes. I think Superman's grieving, but the fact that he immediately jumps to, that's it, I'm taking control now.
well,
Um,
it's more so the fact that he goes and kills the Joker right away and then goes and
yeah,
gets
like
Spider-Man.
that makes sense. But then the fact that he can't sit and contemplate and work through his emotions after the fact when he's a grown adult man who
Well,
went through high school and puberty and should know how to deal with his problems.
yeah,
As a superhero, you deal with death. So
true.
you should, yes, of course, your wife dying is going to impact you greatly, but it's not going to flip a switch, I don't believe, for a seasoned superhero that sees death daily.
True. Well, another thing is that it's also Superman who's got so much expectations. So I mean, I can kind of see him going down that dark path. What I don't see is all the other heroes banding together with Superman on this, with only a few scraggled behind
Yeah,
that are
like I
teaming up with
get Wonder
Batman.
Woman. She doesn't have the cultural and societal ideals. She's was
Yeah,
raised on an island of just women, an ancient island, so she doesn't have like a certain perspective that a modern person would have.
yeah.
But like the whole just feud is just the point of views are just childish. It's one side. It's black and white. It's either keep the peace and deal with the guilt of not being able to be perfect,
Yeah,
or
which
become
is
absolute
which
dictator.
yeah,
Mhm.
which I will say is different in the comic because they make it very convoluted as to where there's a lot of gray in the comic and I would also say in the game as well. There's very much a lot of gray. There really isn't a good side or bad side to some of
Yeah.
these characters. Some of them, there most definitely is like good, bad. Some of them, it's interesting the way they did it. So at least in the comic, anyway.
Yeah, so other than
So
not liking the story and in general, and then just not liking the way they told it, I don't have too many like specific detailed great grievances.
they got rid of so many characters so early, and that just pissed me off. Thank you for watching this week of Galactic Reviews. Tune in next time when we decide to watch an old classic, Batman Under the Red Hood. And don't forget to like and subscribe and catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audea, Rumble. See you next time on Galactic Reviews.